Hi everyone, good evening. Welcome to Champlain College and to another really stimulating talk, part of the Big Maker series put on by Generator. I think this is the 8th talk in the series, and we've been pleased to host them at Champlain College. My name is Paula Vilken-Riconji. I'm the Dean of the Division of Communication and Creative Media, and we are one of the co-sponsors of the Big Maker series. And we are very pleased tonight to welcome our speaker, Saeed, Arida, and looking forward to this talk. I would like to introduce the Executive Director of the Generator, who will introduce our speaker. So please join me in welcoming Lars Vesselblandt-Torres. Thank you.
Hi, good evening, everyone. I will make this brief. Welcome, thank you so much for coming. I'm a former educator, so I'm pretty darn passionate about the subject we're going to talk about tonight with Saeed. We will hear from Saeed for about 30 to 45 minutes, and then Penny Bishop from the Tarrant Institute will moderate a Q&A. Thank you so much, Penny. The Big Maker series was started in the fall. We had 3 goals. One of the goals was to introduce big thinkers from away, right, from beyond Vermont, to our wonderful state. The second, and I should probably clarify that, introduce folks to our state because this is a profoundly innovative state, going back to the 19th century when we were winning gold medals in Paris for the quality of our butter, all the way to present. Companies like Burton and others that have really innovated on the landscape. So the second goal is then to stimulate conversations with the public, right, with all of you, some of you are educators, some of you aren't educators, but you're interested because you're parents. So the goal is to really stimulate some thinking, help demonstrate
what are some of the big ideas shaping our world 5, 10, maybe 15 years from now, and engage us at that creative level with innovation. And then, of course, the third speaks to the purpose of why Generator exists, which is to spark conversations between innovators, roll up the sleeves, talk a little bit about what makes innovation thrive, where do our ideas come from, and how are they augmented by encounters with others. So those are the 3 goals of the Big Maker series. I hope that you will find they are met tonight. If you're free tomorrow, we do have a workshop for educators at 10 at Generator. Generator is a community-powered makerspace. We get a lot of support from the community, from the city of Burlington, from institutions like Champlain College, and then, of course, from our members. How many folks here are members at Generator? Can I get a quick show of hands? Thank you for showing up. Our members are the lifeblood of Generator. They're our volunteers. They also are the ones who power the ideas that birth new startups and new products and services in Burlington and the world. So thank you all. We have a couple of board members. I see Steve Conant, John Cohn. Thank you all for showing up. Tonight is made possible, and the entire Big Maker series is made possible because of some of our great partners. The city of Burlington helped kick this off with a pretty big grant for community programs. The Partnership for Change has kicked in to help tonight's conversation take off. We have the University of Vermont, especially their College of Education and Social Work. Thank you, Burlington Telecom, which has put Burlington on the map as a gigabit city. We also have, of course, Champlain College, the Tarrant Institute. Thank you, Penny. Hotel Vermont, I hope, Saeed, you'll agree, does a nice job hosting our guests from out of town. VCAM makes these talks available online. Thank you. And then, of course, Design Book, which is a crowdfunding platform for equity. If you're looking to launch a startup, Design Book is a homegrown equity platform. All that out of the way, as an educator, it's a really thrill to walk into a learning environment where if you walk up to any young person in that environment, you say, "What are you doing?" They will go on for an hour or 2 or 3. And that was my experience at NuVu when I took a group of educators, including Jim here, down there in the winter. And I came away really enthusiastic about the prospects of a new vision for education, both in Vermont but in the world. I don't care if you're in Dakar, Singapore, Damascus, or Boston, or Burlington. Now, the future of education is exciting, and it's exciting because of people like Saeed. So please welcome Saeed Arida from NuVu Studios. Thank you, Saeed.
Hello, everyone. This feels very presidential with this thing. Thank you. So this is the topic, more seeing and learning. I should be standing here and not move, correct, for the camera? All right, so that makes it even more awkward. So this was actually the topic of my dissertation around 5 or 6 years ago now, and this is the first time I use it, because after that dissertation, the last thing that I wanted to do was use it again for 5 years. So I feel like now there's enough time that passed, between that and now that I can use it. But it's very kind of relevant to a lot of the discussions that we are having with our students, with a lot of the schools that we work with, and education in general. And there is this whole emphasis on seeing, and I will get into a lot more details what I mean by that. I feel like when we are doing a lot of our teaching, the seeing bit is really a big piece of what's missing, and it makes up 50% of the whole picture. So I'm assuming all of you are familiar with this traditional image of education. A bunch of industrialists in the late 18th century, they decided this is how our education should be. And almost 130 years until now, we still have the same exact system. The Carnegie units and all of that, everything came out of that period. And somehow we still use it. And we built this kind of very entrenched chain of things that, you cannot go to college unless you finish high school, and you cannot be in high school unless you finish middle school, and you keep going like this. And every time we talk to people about breaking that chain, everybody is scared and is like, oh, what if my kids cannot go to college anymore? And what if you are in middle school, is like, oh, my kid cannot get into high school. So we really have a very kind of robust, robust means probably positive. So we have a very kind of strange, strong system that really hard to break. And a lot of this is really premised on this whole idea that we need to teach our students a lot of skills until they are probably 18 years old, or even until the end of college, and only then we can trust them to solve problems. Basically, you cannot really solve problems unless you internalize the whole kind of textbook of mathematics or physics or biology or something. Everybody, I think, acknowledges in this world that the end goal of everything is to empower you to be able to kind of live your life in a very happy way and be a productive member of this society. I think the approach to it is usually what is different between different philosophies. And the assumptions that we've built over these years is that you cannot basically problem solve or create anything unless you internalize all of these subjects. And then in grad school, potentially, or in life, we ask you to solve problems, and it's a very disorienting process because we've never really asked you to solve problems before. And I see this every day in my work, and the people that we hire to come work with us, in the companies that we work with, is that the biggest thing that a lot of employers ask for is creative problem solving, the ability to communicate with others and collaborate with them, and that's kind of the piece that is always missing, and people wonder why that is missing. Because we are really missing a big piece of learning, which is the seeing. So in this case, I'm using this is the language that I use in my dissertation on the 50% part of this equation is learning the rules. So you need to know 1 + 1 = 2, because if you don't know that, then you cannot really solve a lot of things. But this is what we only do in schools. We have basically a manual, so you can think of your textbook as a manual, and we are basically dumping all of this in the brains of our kids because we want them to know these things. They don't necessarily know why they are learning this. Probably a lot of them, if you ask a lot of high schoolers why they are learning this, they tell you because I want to get into college. But why exactly? It's like, I will figure it out after I finish college or when I get to college. But actually, a lot of people even don't figure it out, even when they get there. So this is where the seeing piece becomes important. And I'm going to use a diagram that my advisor, George Steiny, kind of put together. He's still a mathematician and designer at the same time, so he uses shapes basically to explain a lot of these ideas about what we mean by learning and creativity. So he divides the the process into two pieces. One is the rules, and the other one is seeing. So the top piece is the rule, as you can see. He wrote 25 books to explain this one, so I'm assuming no pressure if nobody understands exactly what I'm saying. So this is, imagine that you have a rule that says basically if you have a triangle, just rotate that triangle 180 degrees and keep it exactly in its location. And then what I'm gonna ask you where the idea now is, and you start with this shape, and then I want you basically to get to that shape at the end, which is on the lower right corner. So how can you basically apply that rule of flipping the shape 180 degrees or rotating the shape 180 degrees to move from the idea that I have to the final product at the end? And so if you are applying only rules to this, so you will end up just rotating the triangle in its place, and you will never actually get to the end product. The only way that you're gonna get into the product is that by seeing the shapes that you are looking at in a different way. So if you see where the shift in perspective, so suddenly here I am not looking at 3 triangles only, I am looking at 5. And if that shift in seeing does not happen, you will never basically get to the outcome that you want to get to. So this is really the piece that is really missing in our educational system, is that how do you teach that piece? Like, people don't really pay attention to that piece. It's like, I'm gonna teach you the rules, these other pieces you're gonna figure out on your own. And so the question becomes, can we create an environment that can teach you how to see the world in a different way? And there are multiple shifts here in the middle, and you get to the final outcome. He literally really wrote 25 books to explain this, so it's so this is, finding a learning environment that does this is really the key. And I am trained as an architect, so I went to the architecture school at MIT, and I did my master's and PhD there. And I was doing my research on one hand in terms of understanding and decoding the creative process, and on the other hand, I was basically teaching design studios. And a lot of architects usually hate to talk about what happens in the studio. So it's a learning environment that has been in existence for 400 years. So during the Industrial Revolution, nobody managed to kind of standardize the architecture kind of education thing. So it stayed very much as an apprenticeship model, as opposed to all the engineering and all of the other, disciplines that basically got standardized, and you go to a lecture hall and there are 600 people and it's all about textbooks and problem sets and all of that. So basically what I was trying to do is try to merge these things, how I'm trying to decode the creative process and what I'm actually doing in the architecture studio. The architecture studio is a very kind of unique, and I think a big part of it touches on what I was just saying initially in terms of like learning the rules and seeing at the same time. Your first day in an architecture school, you go into a studio, so they call it a studio space as opposed to a classroom, and they ask you to design something that can range in complexity between putting a few cubes together or designing a house, and they don't tell you anything about how you're gonna do it. So you just have to do it. So you come up with something, most likely it's gonna be really stupid and not really good, and then you're gonna show it to your instructor, and your instructor gonna give you a lot of feedback to kind of to do something with it. And this is what happens also with a lot of our students who come to us. They produce something and they show it to us, and we give them feedback, and probably their first reaction to this, that they're gonna cry almost. This is basically the first time in their education that someone is actually giving them feedback to their kind of personal ideas. Everybody assume, even when we teach art in some ways, we assume that it's personal, and I'm just gonna give you feedback on the technical side of it, how to use the brush and all of that, and how to build the ceramic piece. But we never tell you that, take this idea and basically kind of break it apart and give them something around that. We never do that. So this is very known that if you know architects, that their first year, usually in an M arc or a B arc, it's very depressing and they cry a lot, because it's really kind of very different process from what they learned before. It's a complete kind of mind shift in the way they teach. So the other assumption also here is that you never start with a big idea. So when we talk about creativity, like we don't talk about like the Hyperloop, Elon Musk just coming up with that, or like Steve Jobs coming up with the idea of the iPhone. It's never really like this. It's all about the process. There was a process before that happened that led them to that, and we usually ignore that, and we talk about creativity in terms of this massive kind of crazy outburst that happened. But for us at NuVu, the way we really think about it is really in terms of a process. And the minute we start thinking about it in the process, suddenly it becomes teachable. Because I'm not, like, if I'm teaching you how to come up with this outburst, I'm never gonna be able to kind of, I don't know what to do, like put some like magical things in front of you and something gonna happen. That is not a good recipe. But what we can tell them is that start with a seed of an idea, that it can be probably the worst seed ever, but if you basically have a rigorous process, then you're gonna get to something at the end that looks pretty awesome. So a lot of the things that we do at the school is really kind of helping the students trust the process. And this is really hard. It's something that does not happen overnight. So if I showed this diagram to my students the first day, they will think I am stupid. But, you know, as they do it over and over again, you know, like they really get used to it and it becomes more of a mindset. And this is the piece about seeing, you know, it's not like I can give you an equation 1 + 1 = 2 and that's it. This is something that you really need to do over and over again. And this is basically what happens in the designer's brain, and this is what we are trying to instill in the students. And that's what happens when we were looking at the triangle initially, that you know, you can always look at that 3 triangles and see them as 3, but you can also look at them and see them as 5. And this is the thing that really requires a lot of training. So when the students are showing us something that they produced, this is the tendency of a lot of our students, is that, you know, they are designing a house, they think that they have to put the windows here, and they put the windows, and I want to put the door here, and they put the door here, and they put the roof here, and that's it. There is no kind of critical kind of thinking that goes into this. So what we really try to do is basically kind of almost holding them from one side and shifting their view on it on another way. And the more kind of ways of seeing we introduce them to, the better the outcome is going to be. And it's going to be better because suddenly you have 10 options to choose from. And on top of that, you are going through each option, and you are kind of almost like playing chess when you do a design, like you do a move, and you say, like, what is going to happen like in the subsequent 100 moves. And this is in some ways similar. So I say, if I put a window here that is a circle, if I put it as a square, or I put it as a rectangle, what are basically the consequences of all these design moves? And this is when an expert kind of coach is doing this with the students, you start building an intuition with these students. That, you know, this is, so the students now, by, you know, rather than just like doing an action without thinking about it, every step of the way, basically they are saying, did I make the right decision? And I need to zoom out, I need to look at all the other options that I missed, and probably another option is better. And this is really the key kind of aspect of what we are trying to teach them, how to kind of make better design decisions as they go through the process. And you know, at the cornerstone of architecture education in the studio environment is the critique kind of culture that is part of the whole environment. So as I said, the students are putting their work in front of the instructor, and the instructor is giving them feedback. And sometimes in a studio environment, we could have potentially 3 instructors, and each one is giving you not just a different feedback, they are giving you a completely contradictory feedback. You know, someone is telling you do a circle, the other one is do a rectangle, and if I do a circle, I'm gonna kill you, and if you do this, and it can get intense between the coaches, which one is kind of thinking that their intuition is better. And so obviously the students who are not used to this, their first reaction to this is like, I'm confused, paralyzed, I don't wanna do anything. But what this really teaches them is that there is a whole kind of synthesis process. So you are hearing what the teachers are saying to you, and they are, you know, from their expert mode, they are telling you, you know, what the best decision to make, but it's ultimately kind of on the student's responsibility to kind of make the best, you know, decision that they think they're gonna make. And usually in an architecture setting, the worst thing that you're gonna, as an instructor, that you will see is that the students is doing exactly what you asked them to do. Because that means is like you are just taking the ideas of the instructor and making them. So this is, For us, obviously, with the younger age, experimenting with this with the younger students is a little bit hard, and sometimes in the initial kind of time when they are with us, it's more on the prescriptive side. But as they do it more and more, the whole synthesis piece becomes really key. So synthesize all the feedback, make design decisions, and then make another prototype, and then show the prototype to the instructor. And basically, you end up with something that looks a little bit like this. So sometimes you keep going in the process, and you think that you are making the right decision, and suddenly it's like, oh, this is actually not working. It's a dead end, and then you go back to something that happened before, and you pick up on that, and you basically move forward. And this process can be very daunting and complex for the students, and so our goal basically with the students is really to teach them exactly this process and how to think about it. Because for us, the creative process is something that we can decode and we can teach, and it can be something that we can all talk about. And this is the thing that we don't want to happen. This happens a lot with our students where, initially the process is very open and they are looking at different ways of seeing, but they lock into something, this is what I want to do, and they keep doing it. And this is what, sorry if some of you are engineers here, but this is what engineers likes to do. So I actually started the school with an aerospace artificial intelligence, also the PhD student from MIT at the time. And every time we started solving problems, we are just kind of screaming at each other. Like we had no language even in the middle to kind of mediate between us. And it's exactly this problem. For me, at any given kind of phase in the design, I want to basically zoom out and look at all the options that I'm missing. And for him, he loves equations and algorithms and all of that, and he has supercomputers to do all the calculations for him, and he locks into the solution, and there is no way he's going to basically leave that. And he has the capacity to spend a year basically just playing with all these numbers, and he might come with something at the end that really satisfies the problem, but at the end of the day, he probably missed a lot of things. And I feel for us, it's always, we were just talking before dinner here, before the talk, is that our dream always is to produce students who are really a fusion of me and David, someone who can basically have all the skills in the world, but at the same time have a kind of a designer mindset that would allow him to kind of zoom in and out when they are solving problems. And a big part for us is because this is the only thing that we do with our students, a big part of it is documenting this process. So we want to make sure that all the design decisions that the students are making, that they are recorded. So we ask the students to do this every day, and we ask them basically, why did you make the decision that you made, and what are the decisions that you did not make? Because we want them to list basically all the options also that they considered but did not choose. And that's kind of part of building that critical kind of decision-making kind of process into frying that into their brain, so it becomes more of a second nature to them. So we get into the school. So so how do we take all of that stuff and basically use it as the groundwork for a new type of learning environment that is focused on middle and high school students? And this is the space that we have. It's in Cambridge, in Central Square. We have around 45 to 50 students. It does not have grades. It does not have subjects. It does not have a lot of things that we usually associate with traditional schools. It's an open space with a lot of tools to make things, and I'm going to show you just a quick film just to kind of get an idea about the culture of the place. I mean, you should ask Lars, but these are exactly the sounds that you hear when you come to our space. So this is, we all sit and sometimes it's like, I cannot take this anymore, I'm going home. But, these are kind of the type of sounds that you are hearing all day long. So it's a very, when you go into this, this is not a school, and it does not really feel like a school. So when we started building our curriculum, that is completely based on studios, we decided to basically do these studios as a 2-week long module, and that's the only thing that the students are doing at the time. So from 9 to 3 every day for 2 weeks, they are just focused on one problem. Before that, we start with a week that we call the Genius Camp, and this is just to get some of the technical skills out of the way. So we don't spend a lot of time at the beginning of the studio teaching those skills to the students, because as I said before, we want to get them into the mode of creating as quickly as possible. I cannot really set them, the last thing we want to do is set them in a lecture room for 3 days to internalize all the information that we need to internalize, and then we tell them to solve something. I think for us, that's usually like teaching them the skills is a means to an end, which is basically to do that creative exploration that we want them to do. So we do that the first week, and then in subsequent sessions, we are dividing them into studios. Even our classes, we call them studios, and then we have around 12 students in each, and we are giving each group a different challenge to solve. And then we do this for 6 weeks, and then we do something that is called open innovation, and this is it's also done as a studio, but rather than the coaches giving the problem to the students, basically they have to come up with their own problem that they are solving. And this is what happens during the 2-week studio. So we give the students a problem brief. This is kind of the challenge that we are asking them to solve. And then we frame the problem to them. So this is when we try, so if we are doing a studio around cerebral palsy for a few kids in Mexico, we have them Skype with all of these kids. We bring a lot of local kids who have CP and all of that, and we basically, for a lot of kids who have no idea about this condition, we want to create this vivid context for them. So when they are solving the problem, they are really aware of a lot of the conditions that revolve around that. And we also teach them some of the missing skills that we did not teach them that first week during the Genius Camp. And beyond that, basically the bulk of the studio, a lot of it really goes into coming up with ideas, forming the teams. Usually our teams are made up of 3 students, and it's a problem-solving process that takes almost 8 days, and then there is a final review. So for us, there is this what we call a creative rhythm. So every 2 weeks, you have to present in front of your peers and parents and stuff, and we kind of critique also the work then. So that also builds up a really kind of interesting creative culture around the work that our students are doing. We got a lot of tools. So you can think of this as a makerspace, or you can just think of it as a shop. We have a lot of CNC machines, which is what people associate usually now with makerspace, is like all of these machines are controlled by the computer. This is the digression that this is not totally relevant to my talk, but this is the thing that, as we work a lot with schools, and for me, not coming from an education background, but from more of an architect, I thought architecture is very trendy, because every 15 years there is something different, and I thought this is kind of stupid. You cannot just change things every 15 years. And as I got into the K-12 education, it's that changes every year. And there's I never really understood why, 6 years ago when we started talking about starting NuVu, everybody was talking about 21st century skills. Even at the time, that name, why they are called 21st century skills and not 20th century skills, was even weird. But nobody uses that term anymore. And then people kind of switch into STEAM now. Sometimes you hear them talk about design thinking, but now the big word is makerspaces. And you hear it from everybody. It's we are building these makerspaces, but we have no idea what to do with them. And I think a big part of it is that unless you really change the underlying pedagogy of the system, the makerspace is not going to do anything to you, because almost every school that we work with had a theater shop before. So they had tools that are not necessarily seen in Saeed, but like you have everything that you can use to build, but nobody used them. So why do you think now if you add a laser cutter and a 3D printer, just suddenly the school is gonna transform? It's not gonna transform. They're gonna sit idle without being used. So the thing that we usually tell our partnering schools is that you really have to change the pedagogy and you have to make sacrifices, because you cannot just teach all of the subjects that you want to teach and add something on top of that. You really have to re-engineer the whole system that will create kind of basically spaces for this type of learning to happen. Something that we spent probably the last 3 years working on is what we call a studio management system. So if you are familiar with like LMS, which is a learning management system, a lot of the existing solutions that are out there, a lot of them are focused on regular courses. So assignments and grading and all the traditional stuff that goes with regular courses. But for us, the whole kind of premise was very different, and it was really based on this open-endedness, on documentation, on presentation and collaboration. So we've basically spent the last 3 years coming up with this idea and iterating on it and making it better. So this is kind of, if you go to our website, it's based on it. So the first thing that you see when you go to our website is our students' work, because we feel like what is better to reflect kind of the culture of the place other than the students' work. And because the documentation is a big piece, it's really built more like a blog as opposed to kind of this back-end system that nobody sees other than the students. This is something that you can share with the world, and you can collaborate with people all over the world on it. We've built also a few tools that would allow you, for instance, to take pictures, and they get streamed kind of over the Wi-Fi, and they go to the website. So we have tons of cameras all over the campus, and you're just taking pictures of all of your progress. And then at the end of the day, all of these pictures are stored in your kind of project folder, and you just click on them, and you type a few things, and you have the documentation ready. And also a big part of why this platform is becoming really key for us is that when the students graduate from our program, we want to basically preserve the work that they have done. So a lot of people talk about it in terms of a portfolio system. But so this is a student who graduated after 4 years with us. She has a collection of 50 projects, and all of them are heavily documented. And this happened by default. It's not like you come to the end, it's like, like, what am I going to do? Where are my projects? By default, your projects are already all kind of documented. Another piece is really this piece that, usually this is the first question that I get after every talk that I give. Is like, oh, so what happens to assessment? How do you grade this and all of that? And I think the philosophy that we have is that I would never tell students if you are taking A or B or C, because every kid is really getting something out of it. It's up to them what they are exact. So I'm not going to go to them and tell them what they got exactly out of it. So what we do is we do a process called tracking. So we just want to tell the students where they are at, and usually our kind of skills are divided into technical skills. So do you know how to use that particular CNC machine or not? And on the creative side, how was your kind of how are you synthesizing the critique? What are you doing with that? The culture of collaboration and your openness to collaboration and the presentation. So we we basically track those, and we also ask the students to track themselves. And it becomes only a problem if there is a lot of discrepancy between what we are saying and what the kids are saying. But if we are matching, basically, then we are in a good base. So at the end of the day, what we are really trying to do with the kids is just to show them where they are. We're just putting a mirror in front of them and telling them exactly where they are, but this is not something that we will share wildly with the public. So the question becomes is like, we set up this environment, we have the pedagogy, we have the tools, we have the machines, we have the coaches. So what happens after that? So I'm going to show you some of the projects that our students have worked on over the past 5 years. And this is probably the first time I use kind of a thematic way of showing the projects, because it's never really been done. But I feel like now we have a lot of projects that I can just look at all of them and kind of do a little bit of reflection. And when I did that, I think the biggest kind of theme that came out of the projects is something around health and disability and empathy. And it's not surprising because, a lot of these teenagers, if you provide them with the right environment and with the right kind of problem brief, they're gonna produce amazing stuff. So a lot of it for us started with after we got the 3D printers, and we were really excited about them somewhere around 4 years ago. When they started working, the initial model was pretty crappy, but then they got a little bit better. And we started working on 3D prosthetics, 3D printed prosthetics. And for us, when we started doing this with our students, the goal was not to produce a hand that mimics the human hand, but to do something that is more specialized. So in this project, one of the students produced an art hand. So it has a little bit of a capsule, and you can basically attach the right tool to it. And it has a sharpener, so rather than holding a sharpener, your sharpener is embedded in your hand. And the whole idea is to kind of empower the kids to do stuff that you cannot do with regular hand. And this is one of the kids basically who we designed this for. He came to the studio and tested it. Another project that we did was with this kid, Saeed, who has the same name as me, and he was adopted from Afghanistan around 6 years ago. And he uses a wheelchair. And that was probably the first time I started thinking about how terrible of a design the wheelchair is. Basically, you start talking about like putting your stuff. So if you've seen a wheelchair, the bag usually is in the back, which means you cannot access it. So there is no way you can put your laptop somewhere, so unless you put it on your legs, but then the computer gets really hot and you cannot use it. And so when he started talking to me about all these problems that he's having, we decided to basically bring in a larger group of students to work with him on coming up with solutions for that. And this is one of the solutions that Saeed came up with, which is a modular tray that would allow you to use it to kind of just basically design a regular tray, or put your kind of a drink on it on the side, or basically use it as a tripod for your camera. And so he came up with all these amazing solutions for it. And this is where, when I started talking about the use of makers, but this is when it actually becomes really amazing, because suddenly these tools allows you to produce something that you would have not been able to produce before. And you can produce it at our space rather than sending it to be machined somewhere else. Now we can machine it in our space, and it's very cheap. This is the other project that came out of the studio. It's called a hand drive. It's a 3D printed kind of stick that you can basically attach to the sides of the wheelchair, and that would allow you to drive the wheelchair in a rowing motion. So rather than basically touching the wheels of the wheelchair, you can just go back and forth. That is usually a lot more efficient. So with the same amount of power that you are using on your shoulder, you can really move a lot more. So these systems exist already in the market, but you have to spend somewhere between $4,000 to $6,000 on them. And what the students wanted to do is to design an open source 3D printed version that would cost only $40. And this is basically what they got to after 6 months. So for us, to kind of allow these, or not teach these kids basically to have the stamina to work on a complicated project like this for 6 months is really what makes the space very special. And so that they put these files online, and anybody basically can download them and print them. And we get a lot of requests from a lot of people basically asking about them and to download them and to make them. And they got invited last year to the White House to try them. And this is Obama when he broke it on the carpet. The carpet was very sticky. If you want to make it to the White House, be careful with the shoes. So that's the. So this is another studio that we did with the kids who have cerebral palsy in Mexico. We were working with the design group that designed solutions for these kids, and so the plan was to work with them over a 6-week period and come up with all these solutions. And so some of these solutions on the left side this is a damping device. So a lot of kids who have cerebral palsy, they have a tremor that can be very severe. So the idea was to dampen this movement by building kind of some sort of a scaffold that you can just put your hand in, and that will stabilize your hand so you can draw. The project in the middle is a mechanical wheelchair that a guardian can basically lift the child up and down easily. So this is it has a mechanical system with pulleys that reduces the weight by almost 20 times. So you can only exert only 10 or 20 pounds, and you can lift someone who is basically 150 pounds. That's the project on the right. This was really cool. It's kind of a little bit of a toy that you can attach to a vest, but the idea of it is to train the motor skills of these kids. So there are toys that allows you to do rotational movement. So as the kids basically are sitting on their wheelchair, they can play with it, and as they play with it, they kind of learn how to do a rotational movement. The same thing with a sliding movement. And this is for us, the best part about these projects is that we are taking the kids into these places, and we are trying with the kids themselves. And the reason I think for us why the disability theme has been really key, because the impact that the kids are having on this world is amazing, and they can see that you can have an impact. So nothing against learning math and physics in a classroom, but you can really start seeing the difference between just being in a classroom and getting a grade at the end of the day, or basically doing this and going on a trip to Mexico and working with those kids on improving the designs that you just made for them. So this is a project that we are working on now. I think this kid is in New Hampshire, that his teacher basically got in touch with us because they saw the wheelchair that we made that goes up and down, and they wanted similar thing that would allow this kid to do gardening. So apparently there is no wheelchair in this world that would allow a kid who wants to do gardening to do gardening. So we thought, this is amazing. So we have, for us, this is the best thing usually, is that to find only one person who needs something, and we basically ask the kids to solve it. So rather than solving something for 1 million people, that's what pharmaceutical companies do. For us, we just do it for one person. And so this is what we, try to teach our kids. If you can have an impact on that one person, then, that is really like, it's amazing. So what they did with this wheelchair is that they wanted to use the same kind of system that you see in these desks, the standing desk. It's called a VariDesk, and it has these 2 hinges, and there are springs that basically dampen the movement up and down. So they decided to use kind of similar mechanism, and you can see the sketch on the top left. And so we are in the midst of making this wheelchair. Hopefully it will be done next week. But you can see how it basically slides in front, and basically that would allow the kid to kind of do gardening, and then you can just snap it back. And it's mechanical, so you don't need motors and stuff. So for us, the best thing would be, when this is done and we take it up to New Hampshire to the kid who's gonna use it, and just see if it's gonna work or not. And you can see the impact on I can just imagine the impact on all the kids who have been involved with this project. Another basically theme of projects for us is something that is focused on our kind of immediate surrounding. So we are always looking for interesting challenges that we can address. We've worked, for instance, a lot with a few of the homeless shelters around, and one of the interesting ones that we've done was around a night shelter. Because there are so many problems that happen with that, is that the people can only stay there at night, and they have to leave during the day, and there is no place for them when they leave during the day. So there are all hosts of issues that come up, and so it was generative in the sense that there are so many problems that we could address, and the students came up with some amazing stuff. But I'm going to talk about something that's a little bit more whimsical and fun. We don't necessarily just do something that is very serious all the time. This was a request of mine, which is to improve the falafel experience in Central Square. I'm hoping that all of you know what falafel is. Sometimes people don't know what that is. So for us, part of it was to kind of not just to change how the falafel is made, but also change the delivery system and how we are presenting it to people. So I was using my mom's recipe because she makes the best falafel ever, and so that's what we wanted to go for, but we wanted to change the form factor of it. So we came up with this idea to make it like more a donut shape. And this is the architect in me, where, like if you have one big falafel base, that means structurally the sandwich is going to be a lot more robust, and that way it's also uniformly distributed in terms of material, and then you can just put the tomato on top of it and you have a perfect sandwich. So this is kind of the thing that we started with. And making a donut falafel was not the easiest thing in the world. We don't have a kitchen, a professional kitchen at the school, so the students would 3D print these molds, and I will take them home every night, and I will try them and report to them about the problems that happened. So this is kind of the stove that I have at home. So we managed to basically get something that I think had a lot of creativity in it, which is basically to bake the falafel initially for like 10 minutes and then fry them, because there was no way. The biggest problem for us was to take the falafel from the mold immediately to the oil. We could not do it. So then, this is what happens like all the time when you get a bunch of people just talking about something. Someone suggests some random stuff, they think that they are stupid, it's stupid, but it's actually the best idea ever. So this is what happened, where someone is like, oh, you should just bake it a little bit, and that gives it a little bit of a shape, and then you can fry it. And so this is what we did, and actually the taste became a lot better because it only needs to stay in the oil for 2 minutes as opposed to like 7 minutes. So it does not absorb as much oil, and you can see it's a beautiful kind of shape at the end there. And there's a secret sauce that goes in the middle. And this is, I'm not showing a lot of process pictures, because if I do that, I'm going to end up with a 2-hour presentation. But this is probably the only kind of picture that kind of describes some of that. So this is what we are asking the students to produce. I want to see a million options so we can decide on what is the best option. I don't want you just to say, I want to make a rectangular thing, and you go and do a rectangular thing. So in this case, I was asking them to imagine all possible kind of designs of a falafel cart that's going to basically house the donut-shaped falafel. And you can look at, and you can even, I think for someone who does not know what we ended up doing, is like you can look at the circle and it's like, that looks like a donut, so we should do that. And the amazing thing about this is that you can see the wheels at the bottom. So they thought that they could have wheels at the bottom, but the shape of it could be a circle. But then we had an expert from outside of NuVu just going around, and he said, this whole thing is a wheel. And it's like, we teared up about all the little wheels, and it's like, yeah, the whole thing is a wheel. So the question becomes like, how can you make a whole wheel that has a cart in the middle? And this is what we ended up with. So we have now these monthly days, we call them the falafel days, where we go outside, and I spend 4 hours at that particular night to make the 50 sandwiches, and we go outside and we make falafel sandwiches. And this is kind of just a quick movie to show you kind of the process of how we did that. very magical when it does that. I mean, it got some problems that we cannot lock it and we cannot stabilize it, but that's for another day. But this is what's amazing about this, is that we're working now with a few organizations in Europe that work with Syrian refugees, and the hope is that to produce a few hundreds of those so they can be used by the refugees to kind of make a living and use it to sell falafel. And we are like also talking with some local vendors to do that. And actually a lot of schools came to us to do like a lemonade stand. So rather than just a boring lemonade stand, they can have a circle lemonade stand. I think this project for us, when I told the students to kind of reimagine the falafel experience, I mean, this is kind of the last thing that I thought they will be able to produce. We always underestimate how our young people are able to kind of think about something, and this, I think, if you got like a few adults to do it, there is no way they could have really done something like this. It's just when you get that combination between really young people who are fearless and who thinks everything goes, and you mix them with a few adults, experts who are able to kind of build something and put it together, and you get something that's pretty amazing. So this is really the spirit of our space, is that how can we enable both the adults and the students to produce something that is very creative, and hopefully, even in its silliness, it's going to have a lot of impact. This is a project that we just finished. It's a mural that is exactly next to us. So this is every time we leave the space, we see this. And it has a long back history to it. But for me, the amazing part about this is like, how can you kind of empower the students to kind of shape their environment. And I think a lot of the kids that I talked to after they did this is like, I can actually have an impact on my surrounding, and I can change them, even if it's just a mural. But the fact that they can have a brush and do something was very powerful to them. So this is, usually we pride ourselves on the creativity of the stuff that the students are producing. But at the end of the day, we are a learning environment, and what we are actually producing is the students at the end of the day. And so the question becomes at the end of like, what type of students do we graduate? And we are still very young, and we only have one graduate so far. So that's a very small sample size, so it's hard to know, but yes, so we made basically a short movie about her, just to kind of show other people, the type of student that you can produce from this learning environment. So here is a short one.
I can code, I can create things, I can do art, I can also do technology. There's nothing stopping me here. My days like sitting around in class, and I tried to pay attention and I just couldn't. I'd spend the day like doodling away and just kind of waiting for the day to be over. I first heard about NuVu through some friends, and so then my mom's like showing me the website, and she's like, oh, it's like a school, you could go there. I'm like, yeah, but I don't get it. Like, how is it a school? Like, I just don't understand like how this exists. I remember Saeed gave us this project, and we had to make these flip books. You could spin and it'd be like a little animation, and it was something like 36 laser cut pieces. So I spent like 3 hours working on it at home. And then I came in and NuVu, and he's like, no, it's just not gonna work. You just don't get it. And then he's like, try doing it again. Oh my God, I can't believe I'm gonna do this again.
I am an artist, and it's a good thing. I see and feel the world very deeply. But I also see the elderly person on the street struggling with the zipper of their jacket, and my mind starts thinking of inventions that could help them.
The great thing about NuVu is I have like both the art piece here and like the mechanical, the technical piece here. As like the art piece grows, then it's like, oh, the technical piece has to grow. And then like as the technical piece grows, then the art piece grows, and like things just keep getting like bigger and better.
So what do we got here?
So this is a hand-drive wheelchair attachment, which can attach to any wheelchair, and it allows it to be powered in a rowing motion. That one was super cool just because it took off. It really became a thing. And it's like, I know that it's something useful for the world, and like people are actually like trying to use it, which I think is super cool. I think that the Fashion Week studios have changed my life in a lot of ways. That's one of the instances where it really goes from 0 to 100 so quickly. And like 100 is like a real fashion show with like real photographers, real models, real everything. I always realized I had that spark and that excitement to learn. But before, I wasn't given the chance to let this grow. After pushing myself through project after project, I see the world through a different lens and see the impact I can make.
Yeah, so this is just a quick sample of the type of students. Always tears me up just to kind of listening to it. It's always, so we were just also talking before the talk about, you know, where is she going to college? And this is kind of the thing that a lot of people stresses about. It's just like, if you don't have APs and if you don't have that, then, you know, the world is going to end and they're not going to end up to going to college. And in the case of Kate, you know, her portfolio was so powerful that I think it made a massive difference where she applied. And it was very particular kind of areas that because it's filmed now, I cannot say like MIT is stupid, you know, so she should not apply to MIT, but this is how it's, you know, we did not, so we were looking for spots that would kind of fit that, the spirit of NuVu, and you know, it was kind of, we could not find a lot of places, so she now is gonna go to a dual degree program between Brown, where she's doing engineering, and RISD, where she's doing design. It's a very selective program. It's 15 kids every year. But, you know, like now it's like, are they gonna just produce these schizophrenic students who are engineers on one hand and designers, or it's gonna be more fused? And that, you know, the hope is like, why is it so hard to produce, like have, you know, college level environments that is more similar to NuVu, where it's like everything is fused and you don't really need to identify as something or the other, like where everything just flows in together and you are using everything basically to create an impact on this world. So beyond basically the boundaries of the school of NuVu that we have, it's a big piece of what we are doing now is work with other schools, some in Boston, but a lot of them also are outside of Boston, to kind of try to kind of help them transition into a mode that is similar to ours. And this is, you know, for us, we realize that, you know, the impact that we are having on 50 kids is not enough, and we need to have a much wider impact. So this is when we start talking about system change. And this is kind of some of the work that we're really excited about. So we do a big teacher training program over the summer. So we work with around 100 teachers from all over the world, from Singapore and India and Germany and the US and Brazil. And this is always very exciting because we treat these teachers more like students when they come to us, and we have them go through mini studios and they produce some wildly amazing stuff at the end. Also, we work with the schools. This is our primary kind of partner now is called All Saints Academy. It's in Florida. And we have this ambitious plan that, you know, within 3 years, we will transition half of their curriculum into studio curriculum. So they're gonna keep the other half as the essential subjects, but we're gonna basically, you know, turn the other half into something that looks like ours. And, you know, the hope is that we can do this with more schools, or a lot of you can do it with also other schools. Hopefully we can get to a system where, you know, we are creating spaces for these students to be creative and to be able to use the skills in a very meaningful way. So, thank you.
Saeed, thank you very much. Let's have another hand. We're going to transition now into a bit of a Q&A. And and explore some of these themes in greater depth. So Lars has invited me to start us off with a couple of questions and then move it out into the audience for some additional questions and comments. So again, thank you so much, Saeed, for that inspiring perspective on what schooling can be. We did have an opportunity to chat earlier this evening prior to the talk, and so had a little bit of time to share what's happening with Vermont education slightly, and share a little bit about the personalization movement that's happening in our schools right now, and a lot of the movement toward maker spaces. And I look out in the audience and see a number of educators here who know what I'm talking about, so that's pretty cool. I'd love to hear you talk a little bit, Saeed, about what you and your educators are grappling with right now. We're always looking to improve the system, and you've taken some enormous strides toward the infusion of creativity. What's not working well for you? What's the thing that you're still trying to figure out?
So many things. I think for us, there's this whole kind of spirit of experimentation. So we never sit down and think, oh, we've done an amazing job. That actually never happens, which is sometimes a problem. We're always kind of trying to make things better. But, for us, one of the big things that we are dealing with now is that when you, so we have, the co-founder, David, who's an artificial intelligence expert, and now suddenly this AI field is becoming as big as it can get. And so we've been kind of trying to figure out ways of how we can teach this to our students. But then in that particular area, there is like heavy kind of prerequisite knowledge that you need to be to start doing even the simplest stuff. But then our whole culture really revolves around this idea that we're gonna give you like the most minimum amount of information so you can get creating. And so we're trying to figure out a way of modularizing it or breaking it apart into smaller pieces to kind of making it work. But this is one of the things that we are trying, to deal with. And I don't know if we have a right answer. We're gonna be prototyping something in the fall, so hopefully it's something that we can work on. I have like 100 million problems. Do you want me to go through them?
That's great. Thank you. The most pressing is helpful. Thank you. It's always good to know that other educators are grappling with big ideas and big concerns as well. Another thing that struck me as you spoke, both before your talk and tonight during the talk, was this idea of fusion, this idea of taking the creative and the skills and expecting people to assimilate those. I think a lot of times we talk about collaboration as a solution to that quandary, that if we create collaborative teams, they will bring those different skills and dispositions to the table. Can you just comment on that? Because the fusion approach is quite different to what we used to call, anyway, the 21st century skills of collaboration.
No, I mean, that the collaboration piece is this is how companies and industry do it, right? Because they bring in a designer, an engineer, and do it. But why can't we have like the same thing happening in one person? So this is the dilemma with me and David. Like I wanted to build something, but I don't know how transistors work. I don't know how all of these things kind of come together. I don't know how he designed this, like the brain of the Mars rover to do something and all of that. And but for me, I have a better idea about like what people want and how to iterate through an idea and all of that. And it's like every time I want to do something, I kind of need to have David with me because I cannot do it on my own. But that what we are trying to kind of instill with our students is that they should be able to have these two things at the same time, and they should have as if like we're really kind of schizophrenic in a way that you need to have two people to be able to do it. But I feel this is kind of a failure on the part of our system. Because it's like you can be this or this, but you cannot be both at the same time. And I think hopefully we're going to produce like new generation of people who are really able to do this in a very effective way. Because if you are the same person who's able to have these two modes, then I think that the way you're going to solve problems and the way you're going to come up with things is going to be a lot more effective.
Thanks. I'm going to ask one more question and then turn it over to the group. I was particularly struck by the potential for youth and youth activism. So it's really exciting to see students who can develop a strong sense of personal efficacy, and there's so many opportunities to do that. And it struck me that there must be a pretty weighty sense of ethical or moral responsibility when you're creating your problem statements. So when you choose whatever problem it is that you're presenting to the students, and I know eventually they identify their own, but as you're working through that, what are the things that you're thinking about?
A lot of things. Obviously we cannot, there are some ethical questions, but also there are some technical kind of logistical questions. We cannot ask them to cure cancer in a span of 2 weeks, right? So that's not, so we need, even within, when we're talking about disability and health, we need to frame the problem in a way that would allow them to be creative within that space without necessarily like a lab and like doing all these experiments that kind of take years and years. So that is a big piece for us. And I think we are getting better at kind of developing this kind of better sense about what the students are able to contribute to. Even, when you talk about health, obviously there are like so many things, but we are able to kind of focus on an area where we feel that the students' creativity can have like a big impact on the problem that we are trying to solve. So the reason why we focus on wheelchairs, for instance, is that because we know that the kids they will be able to kind of take their ideas and turn them into kind of something that we can use at the end of the 2 weeks or the 4 weeks. So this is a big one. The ethical one is a tricky one. I think we are, the school is a product of the people who teach there. So we are definitely biased towards that. MIT, a lot of us came out of there, so the technology plays a big part of what we think politically too, is like a lot of us are kind of in one direction and all of that, and whether you're Hillary or Bernie or any of that, so that makes a difference. But we also do a lot of kind of yeah, that's it's like someone will say, you are going to the state that invented Bernie. It's like, really? I thought he grew up in New York.
Thanks so much. We're limited to one mic, so I'm going to ask you all to speak loudly. I see a hand over there.
So, I don't know what the opposite of pedagogy is. It oligarchy, old guy, old person, gachi. You just said something. So I'm like your worst nightmare. I'd be like David, 35 years as an engineer, MIT engineer. And I see in my industry, exactly what you're saying is we say, we got to bring in a designer. And it's worse than that, because we just count every 10th person and issue them a black turtleneck and say, you're a designer. And what I'm wondering is, are there ideas or resources for getting people, I'm not ready to get rid of the old people, so for retraining for some of those more iterative approaches? Have you given any thought, or do you know anybody who's giving thought on how to make those two things coexist in person if you weren't raised that way? Can you get back to that sort of design thinking, internalizing it, as opposed to needing a crutch? Is anybody thinking about reprocessing us?
Yeah, so just also... So when I talk about David, he's like, the other half of the picture, and I'm the other half, So I never say, if David does not exist, I would not exist, maybe, So it's really important to have both. The question is really that you're asking, can you train both of us to cross to the other side? And I think for us, even me and I think after 5 years of running the school, I think we are a lot closer, But still, I feel like because I was not really. Or when I was exposed to all these skills in high school, I really memorized everything, and none of it really meant anything to me. That's why I went to architecture, because math and physics was not, I memorized all the equations, and I actually scored the top grade in my class because I memorized them. I fried all my memory circuits in my brain that now I cannot remember anything. but that's how, and for David, he was like, just give him a very kind of definitive problem to solve, and that's what he loves doing. This is what he spent 14 years at MIT doing. This is, and, so obviously I think the older you get, I should not be judging, but it becomes harder when you get older, I think. Yeah, I mean, I'm already, all the white hair is here. It's all color here. I'm hiding all the white hairs and the. But it's obviously for us a big reason to focus on young kids, because we thought, if you start doing it from a very young age, because we are, when you're talking about this design and the design mindset, it's really a mindset. It's not like I'm trying to teach you 1 + 1 = 2. So the question becomes is like, how can you integrate these things from an early stage? And this is where we found, like, the studio format is really a great way to do it. So you get some of the skills, but then you immediately need to apply these skills and use them for something. But then as you do that, you need more skills, because you cannot really take the idea further unless you learn more. So you learn more, but then you immediately basically take that and do something with it. So there is always this kind of going back and forth to do it. And, we definitely think that thing is very teachable, and this is what we do with our teachers, even in the span of 1 week. We really kind of show them that it's possible, and sometimes you cannot do it on your own. You have to collaborate. If you are a technical person, then bring someone who's more on the design side, or if you are design, bring someone on the technical. But as you do it more and more, it gets better. So, long answer, sorry.
So how do you create an empathetic and safe space for these students?
Could you repeat the question?
Sure. How do you create a safe space for these students to, and just an empathetic space where they're not judged for experimenting?
Because that's not the case.
I would say they are very judged.
But
So
in a way that leads them to take more risk.
But this is where I feel like sometimes we cuddle the kids too much. In our educational system, where like you're gonna try like a million ways to say the thing that you want to say to them, but you don't want to say it direct. And I think even with Kate also, she was joking, I think, at the beginning of the video, but I just did not say that, this sucks and it does not work. I said all the reasons why it does, so they know why it does, as opposed to like, it's just bad. Like, you cannot just say it's bad, you have to kind of really provide full kind of reasoning why it is bad. But this is what I feel sometimes is kind of, even parents sometimes, right? Like, they don't want to critique their kids because it's like they make the ugliest drawing and you put it on the fridge because it's a masterpiece. And you never say, like, because you might give them some feedback, you need to change the brush, or you do, and they can actually make it better, but somehow we don't do that. And this is the same thing in school. You produce something. There is, obviously, this is a sweeping kind of judgment. Sometimes if you are writing an essay, someone gives you feedback on it, and then you improve it. But probably it happens maximum like once or twice, right? As opposed to like, in a span of 2 weeks, this is happening like a million times, right? So it's like you are getting feedback every hour, and then you are taking that feedback and doing something with it. And so for us, the big thing that we are really trying to teach our kids is that your ideas are not personal. Your ideas are an artifact. That, we always kind of mention this analogy to our kids, that imagine that basically taking your ideas out of your brain and putting them on the table. So I am just talking about those. I'm not talking about something personal. So obviously, when the first time this happens, their face is red. Why are you criticizing me? It's like, I'm not criticizing you as a person. I'm just criticizing the thing that you made, and an idea is something that you made. So this is always, for us, we write it really big, is that, NuVu as a space where ideas can be critiqued, and we are not really afraid of that. So.
Is this a model that you imagine ultimately most students today could, I'm not talking about realistically, but that they all could potentially really do well in this kind of an educational environment, learning environment?
So is the question, can be this successful with every kid? Is that kind of the question?
Or do you imagine this is, a special place that some kids apply to and could get into and go to and thrive in? Or do you imagine this really could be the new way?
I hope so. I mean, this is why I wake up every morning and go to the place, because I think, something like this should really, everybody should be exposed to it. And obviously we are way off the grid, that I don't really imagine all of our schools turning into this overnight. But, I think we probably get like at least, 3 to 4 schools coming through the space every week. And for us, a big part of it was just to show people that something like this is possible. And whatever they take out of it, at the end of the day, it's really up to them. But, just to show educators a very alternative version that works in a different way, is that the hope that can, start, affecting change in the schools all over the world.
Can you, just to follow up briefly on that question, can you think of a student who's come through the school who hasn't been successful? And if so, can you talk about those conditions?
Yeah, I mean, we've had obviously a few cases where, the students were not reachable at all. And I think that they would be unreachable whether they are in a traditional environment or whether they are at NuVu, and they needed some care that goes beyond anything academic. And I feel like an environment like this has really kind of very low threshold, to a point where we really talk about NuVu sometimes as a rehab place. Because everybody who comes to us basically came from the traditional environment because the environment did not work for them. And they were looking for something different. And for us, I think the thing that we pride ourselves on is the transformation that happens to these kids. Like within 3 months or to a year, and you can really see the impact. Like you can also ask the parents about, and they can really explain it. It's like, sometimes, the kid was into kind of destroying things and hacking, but they never finished something. They were not rigorous about the process. And now, the parents were telling us is like, oh, he finishes every project. He knows a lot about how to do that. So this is one thing. Another, parent would say, that the kids are a lot more engaged with their school because they know what the outcome at the end of the day is. This is what, their life is going to be. So it's an environment like this can really be very powerful, because you are, showing the kids that immediately the impact of what they are producing. Mm-hmm. And as opposed to like, you need to learn all these skills for 12 years, and then we might trust you with something to do. As opposed to like, now you can do it. So.
How are you integrating like humanities, fiction reading, fiction writing? I mean, there's a lot of writing and critical thinking and research that's happening, but what about sort of the history? History, I can see how that gets integrated, but the humanities in general, how does that work in the studio model?
It's a difficult one. I mean, for us, there is a sense of fluidity between everything. A lot of us who work there did study the humanities and went to liberal art colleges before they did design or stuff like that. So there is, so for us, the end game is really to solve something that we are telling you. But then, use a lot of stuff to basically make it happen. So we never really kind of create segments in terms of like, what exactly you are learning along the process. Are you learning history or philosophy or humanities or design? It's really hard to kind of really do it. We do some of that after the fact. So we can start kind of deconstructing this a little bit so we have a better sense, but it's still kind of not easy. And I would say, NuVu as it's constructed now is very biased towards certain things. So we care about, AI, so we're gonna push a lot towards AI, right? Because this is a lot of the people who are and who work there are into it. A lot of us care about social issues. So suddenly a lot of the projects we're doing is about like, solving disability or helping some people who have some medical issues and all of that. But I can imagine a completely different place that is biased towards, more humanities issues, like not building physical stuff, but addressing something that you produce reports at the end or you produce papers and stuff. So I'm not saying these are the type of problems that everybody should work on. if I'm advocating for anything, it's really the idea that, you know, we need a lot of these environments, and these environments have to be very different from each other, so the kids also can choose like which one they want to go to. But for me, it's completely okay that, you know, when students graduate at the end of their senior year, they are as different as it can be. Like, I don't understand when we look at their transcript and it's like, they took 6 ABs and they have A or C or C, and it's like, what does that tell me about the kid? Nothing. So.
Coming from a student's perspective, I graduated high school in 2012, and I really regret that this was not there when I was learning myself, coming from a kid that has attention deficit disorder and was highly medicated through the whole schooling process and did not conform to the reading and writing aspect of school. And I was just wondering, how would a student, I know for me, high school came down to SAT scores in the end in my GPA. How would a student be given the skills to do well on an SAT test or something where they would, could apply to a higher academic college?
Yeah, the higher academic college piece is that tricky piece, right? So we've had a kid who has been with us now for this past year, and he's severely dyslexic. Obviously, when you are like that, you are either put in a special kind of program, or if you are grouped with a bunch of the other kids, then your scores on everything is very low, and that because you cannot really read as fast, and you know, you cannot decipher what's going on, you know, in front of you all the time. So suddenly you are feeling like you are a big failure. You cannot really catch up with everybody else, and this is, you know, becomes something that defines you. And so when we had cases like this that come to us, I think that the first thing that happens to them is when they start producing stuff and it's interesting, it's like, oh, I am not completely kind of disabled in some way, right? Like, I can still produce amazing stuff. And that one kid that I'm talking about, I did not actually realize that he's dyslexic until the end of the year when their parents told me that he's dyslexic. It's like, how come, like, we've had 9 months and I did not even know? Because he is able to express himself in different ways that does not involve necessarily reading a textbook, you know? So there are many ways you can be successful. And I think that is like, you know, because our traditional system is so geared towards that singular test or something, and if you deviate from it, then it's a problem, and it creates like so many issues associated with that. So, I mean, the good thing is that there are colleges that don't necessarily require that. So but yeah, I mean, it's like, we were just talking about like how heavily medicated our students are, especially even the kids who come to NuVu, and it's like, it's insane, you know, it's like, and it's not helping in some ways, right? Because they cannot still focus on things, and they cannot sit, you know, and all of that, and we don't want them to sit, right? Like, just go dance like the whole day, it's fine, as long as you are engaged with the issue and you are, you know, producing something that has impact, and so yeah, I think something kind of radical needs to change to accommodate that. But I think it's really the biggest thing for us is like create an environment where these kids can feel successful. Because the minute that happens, like, they become very confident. And this one kid now is working on a very, very ambitious project. He is actually like one of our best students that we have now, which is kind of amazing to see.
We had some hands over here. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the teachers at NuVu, and for 7 years taught at a really incredible alternative school that was sort of a last chance school for at-risk teenagers. And a lot of what you said really resonated and inspired. But I was thinking about how the difference between, and so many of the teachers I worked with are brilliant and creative and just amazing, but the difference between the teachers who were amazing and the ones who struggled was like, it's like an art form. It's like the ability to assess, not as like grade a test or like a formal assessment, but like see in the moment what that student needs and give that, like, ask just the right question or offer just the right piece of encouragement or critique. And it's, you know, it really is an art form. And it was cool to hear about your summer workshops where teachers are immersed in it, so they can sort of have a reflective piece in terms of, hey, what's working on me and how are these experts doing it. But I know at our school, in order for us to become better and better teachers, we had like ongoing weekly professional development where we were getting together with one another and doing sort of peer supervisions and talking through the hard things and all of this stuff. How do you, in addition to sort of inspiring people to start thinking in these ways, how do you support your partner schools or do teacher trainings, or how do you do ongoing professional development there? Like how do you teach the teachers recognizing that really is art or craft?
Could you hear the question? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely an art, but it's calling it an art in some ways also makes it slightly mystical. And for us, this is the thing that we created the whole place because we don't think, creativity is mystical. Right? It's a rigorous process, and the more prototypes you made, the better the outcome it's going to be. The more iterations you produce, the more kind of branches, the more ideas that you disregard, the better the outcome because you are choosing better. So for us, it's a very rigorous process that is completely teachable. So the way we do it with the teacher is really through the studio environment. We give them a problem to solve, and we guide them through it, through the process to solve it, and that's how we teach it. So it's as iterative as process. Cool. It's like really learning by doing, right? Even to become, for me, I think a big part of becoming kind of a good kind of studio instructor was really doing it over and over. When I was teaching at MIT, it was like, the first time I was doing it, it was not really good because, as you said, like the most important piece about being kind of an instructor in the studio environment is to be able to kind of hear what the students are saying, understand on the spot what they are saying, and formulate a lot of different ways of seeing the thing that the students are not seeing, and saying that on the spot. I mean, you have to be on your toes in a very creative way. It's an exhausting thing to do, and this is what our coaches, after 3 o'clock, everybody is dead. Right, like I have no creative juice left in me, because it just, but that happens by doing it, it does not happen by giving you a recipe, but it's really more of a mindset.
Thanks for your talk. I'm in the medical school and I see the same destructive effect of the assessment system that you're talking about from the SATs on down. It's toxic to creativity. So I appreciate what you're doing with the assessment. I was talking to a guy who does songwriting in elementary school and has a very similar process to what you do of kind of iterations and generating ideas, and sort of an acoustic version of what you're doing visually, just striking because I was just talking to him. Surely you're going to have disruptive students in these collaborative groups, and I guess part of what they're learning is to self-regulate, or how do you navigate that? Are you entrusting them to solve their problems with their own disruptive group members, or can you give an example of that?
Well, I think for us the process is very guided. So we have 3 students working on projects, on a project together, and especially if a lot of these kids were not exposed to this process before, like they get disoriented, they are paralyzed, they have no idea, and it's really the role of the instructor to basically come into this group and guide them through this process. Like, you are just thinking about one thing, why don't you branch out and think about these other things? Do you think we should go with this option? And if we go with this option, all of these things can happen. Or if we go with this other option, we should go. And you ask them, like, which one do you want to go through? And all of that. And you basically pick this one. And it's like, why don't we go with this one? So they go with this one. Then they prototype the idea further. And you come back to them. And, but then we get, we do a lot of like what we call social engineering too. So it happens so many times that, these kids have never really worked together before. And someone told me before is that, by default, kids are very creative, but they are not collaborative. So it becomes, the collaborative piece does not come naturally to them. The creative piece comes naturally to them in terms of coming up with ideas. We suppress that as the kids get older, but it's there. You can really seek it out. But the collaboration piece is really the thing that really takes a lot of practice. And even I remember my days at MIT, like I probably fought with everyone that I worked with. And then now, obviously, in retrospect, it's like all of these things were so silly, right? Like, who's going to take ownership of this? Like, why am I taking... And it's like, if you look at it 5 years down the line, it's like it was the stupidest thing to do, right? Like, who cares, right? Like, at the end of the day, it would be a lot better to produce something that is really cool, whether my name on it or like 10 other people on it. It does not matter. And so these are like the kind of stuff that we try to teach the kids at that young age. And a lot of these things come up. It's like, why this kid is working not as hard as me? Why this kid is not? And, we really help them kind of go through it.
So I guess I'm kind of on the other end of the spectrum. I'm in high school right now. And I see a lot of shift in the way that my teachers are starting to address the interactions that they have with students and how they're going about teaching us. But I'm wondering what your perspective is on how this generation of students needs to go about taking ownership of our future education and what we can really do to kind of kickstart this reform that's clearly taking place.
I mean, it's a cool question. I don't know how much power the students have in this equation. It's always the older people, deciding for the younger ones. I think for us, the big thing is really create spaces like the ones that we have where the students are empowered to kind of make decisions about, the type of people that they want to be when they grow up. Like, we don't need to wait until they are in fourth year college to do that. You can actually start doing that when you are in 7th and 8th grade. And our, especially that 7th and 8th grade is so kind of really key. A lot of our students come to us during that age, and it's like so formative in the way that it shapes their thinking, like so much going. And it's these kids produce some amazing stuff. Some kid started a company and it's profitable and it's on business on the side, and it's like, if the end goal of life is to start a company and make money, he's already done it when he's like 13 years old, right? So like, so it's yeah. I mean, it's. I don't know. Our school system is so tricky, and sometimes like I am very optimistic about it, but also sometimes I'm just like, it's this gigantic thing that is like very, very hard to move. So the hope is that, we create more spaces that, where the kids really feel really just at the end of the day empowered to kind of make an impact. And then I think that when they start internalizing that process, things get better.
Well, I guess I just would add that I think in Vermont there's a pretty major student voice movement afoot, and I don't know what school you're at, but there's a lot of, I think, agency for students right now, from local action within schools all the way up to sitting on the state board. And so I'd love to chat with you later. I have plenty of ideas for you. So.
The agency towards what? What do you think?
Well, I think Vermont's in a very exciting place right now educationally with Act 77. We talked about a little while ago, having passed in 2013, and we have a space where we no longer are beholden to the Carnegie unit, for example. We have personalized learning plans laid out ahead of us to explore, and we're only going to do that well with student voice as a part of that. So, yeah. Yes.
A senior at St. Michael's College. I do have a focus on education, and just with my schooling in general, growing up in the past, I went to public schools. We never had access to any sort of makerspace or anything, so I actually didn't know how to do anything until my 3rd year of college when St. Michael's integrated this makerspace, which is actually so helpful. So that's my comment. And then another question is, with this learning style, does it require specific training for individual teachers, or would it be something like that a seminar could be held where a bunch of teachers go to?
I think we should move NuVu here if there's no Carnegie units here. That would be. Yeah, so that's special. I mean, for me, I'm like very big supporter to kind of teach in a studio environment. So for me, you cannot really teach this mindset in a class or a seminar. You really have to do it and what I was really explaining about the studio environment, what's unique about it is that you're really learning the rules and learning the ways of seeing at the same time. And if these things are not intertwined, then there is something missing for me. So yeah, what I found really over the last 5-6 years is that this is really one of the most effective ways to do that. So, are we taking more questions?
And kudos to St. Mike's for integrating that makerspace and having you here tonight. Yes. Yeah. Speak up a little bit.
We are actually neither. We are a private company, intentionally set up this way so we can do anything that we want to do and without having anybody kind of telling us what to do. So that was really the only way we could do it. It just, yeah.
Kind of few question. So I see you just show us about 2 very successful projects. Well, I'm curious. Well, do you have enough good project for the students? And between the 2 programs, do they have how many days? Well, what's this day? What do they do? I mean, for example, the students just finish one program, and before they enter the next one, they have how many days be again, and what do they do in this case?
So it's it sounds like the link between the first week and then the 2-week blocks and then the 4 weeks. Is there time in between? What happens?
I mean, it's not sequential in a way. They finish one and they just move to the next one, and they are not related to each other. Sometimes they are working, as I say, on, for instance, the falafel cart. The other week they are working on a podcast to address some other issue, and then they are working on a movie or an animation or a video game. So they are not related. But I probably have, in terms of like how many good projects you have. I have almost like 200 slides. I only showed 50 of them. So there is always something really interesting in what the students produce. Sometimes it's very polished and it looks finished, and sometimes it does not. But I think what is always interesting about these projects, there is always something creative in them. And I think this is at the end of the day what's really important.
So, your school's NuVu, yeah. Right? Looks really well funded in order to have the amount of machinery and gear and tools that you have. In a public school system, that funding, at least in Burlington right now, that funding is not there. Is there, if you were to suggest a place to start in terms of what are the most useful tools to acquire in order to kind of get your feet wet?
So when we started this 6 years ago, we actually had no shop at all. We had a few scissors and X-Acto knives, and I think our first year was as successful as this last year. So I don't think you really need anything to start. We used the snips and pliers, and these are like really cheap, and with $500 you can really do anything that you want. Obviously, having 3D printers and stuff allows you to do something that is more polished and more interesting, and something that can be market ready and all of that. But that's like a plus, if it's there. So I don't really think you need any resources. For us, we are completely tuition dependent, and relative to the Boston market, I think our tuition is very, very cheap. So our tuition is $29,000. Compare that to all the tuition of the private schools around, which is $45,000. And our tuition actually includes all the materials and all the supplies and everything that the students need to produce. So within our ecosystem, we are relatively really cheap. This is what the Cambridge kind of public school system allocates per student, which is $29,000.
And then, are you at capacity right now in terms of enrollment?
We are capacity in the space that we are in, yeah.
And then my final question is, have you all ever thought about in the future having any kind of exchange student program where like students from Burlington could come and live with students in Cambridge or the Boston area and
that would be great.
Be part of but could they be part of the program? Could a student come in and be part of this program short term, for a project or two as opposed to?
So we have the shortest period is 3 months. 3 months. Yeah, so that's for us because it's like there is no point of coming for 2 weeks. because for us, it's really the transformation that happens throughout the 3 months. The only time where we do it for 2 weeks is the summer. So the reason also, I forgot to mention that the reason why relatively our program is really cheap, because we work our ass off during the summer. So we have almost like 300 kids who come in the summer, and we have the 100 teachers who are coming. So that obviously, if we did not have that summer piece, probably we would need to charge our kids $45,000. But because we are working in the summer, we are able to reduce that amount by almost $15,000.
Okay, I just had some logistical things. I love hearing you say that because I have a private studio and we're doing the X-Acto knife, all of this kind of maker stuff on the sheet. But logistically, I'm curious, are all of the students working on the same project? Like, do you have 50 students, they're all, this is your problem, and you're all the same? Or are they working on multiple projects?
They are divided into 4 studios, and each basically 12 kids are working on a different problem.
But 12 are on the same problem and 3 teams?
Yeah, and within that, there are 4 teams of 3, and each team is working on their own idea within that framework.
Okay, and then what happens when a student wants to continue? You have a time period, so they start and end at the same time, but often, like I have students all the time that are dragging projects along. We're starting something new, but they're trying to finish something up, or they choose.
I think the amazing thing for us is that this 2-week limit, actually, what is amazing about it is that it really forces the students to finish. Because if you don't have that deadline, it's going to drag. So this is it, you're going to finish and you have to present and all of that. Then during the open innovation period for us, which is 4 weeks, that is when the students can pick up an older project and continue in it. But yeah.
It's just interesting, just logistically.
And we have our full-time students who are with us for longer periods than 3 months. They get a whole semester. Their spring semester is usually one big project that they are working on. And that project is very, very substantial. And so the wheelchair that I was talking about at the end, this is something that's been taking like the whole semester, yeah.
That was helpful, thank you.
To address a few things, some students, etc., as far as like, we don't have a makerspace, or how do we get a makerspace? A lot of schools actually have a makerspace. It's called a shop. And there's been shop classes, and you may not even actually realize that there were shop classes, or there's actually a shop in your school. I'm really amazed. I'm a teacher. I teach design engineering stuff, and I operate out of a shop. And it's amazing how many kids walk by and don't realize that.
I think a big part of it is like our kind of, in this country, that the vocational kind of system really created this notion that if you go to these shop classes, you're going to become like auto mechanic. Right. And now we really are, I think hopefully in a phase where we're going to try to kind of re-engineer how we think about these, that it's really, you can be an innovative, and this should be like, the technical should be at the forefront of the school as opposed to the other stuff.
Well, just because you bring in a 3D printer doesn't always
right, exactly. Yeah.
I've always been a makerspace. We're making all the time.
On the same page, my friend.
But I have one really good question.
Yes.
What would you see as your worst failure, and what would you see as your best failure?
My head is spinning after this. What is this question? Can you even quantify a failure as best and worst? I think this is, for us, I think this is something that in the innovation kind of world, people say like you have the sooner you fail, the better. But like really for us, it's never really a failure, it's just an iteration, right? And sometimes some iterations are better than the others. So even the notion of failure is not really like necessarily, because you are imagining that something is very clear. For us, like when the students are producing on something, even when they produce the final thing, I can look at it and say, this is amazing, and David can look at it and say, this sucks. And sometimes it's solving a real problem, but like we see it very differently. So for us, we always try to keep this in mind, that everybody sees the world in a different way, and we have to accommodate these different views, even when we are judging an item. I'm amazed you still guys have still questions. I'm like...
a couple more questions. I saw your hand. Yes.
Yeah. I'm not even sure if this is a fair question, and it might be
It's getting harder by the end of the night.
Yeah. You know, I mean, you hire the people that work at your school, right? And so, like, what do you look for?
Obviously, this is also a discussion that we've been having. We cannot find fused people who have these like very strong skills and at the same time have these design mindsets. So we end up hiring either this or this, and we have them work together. So all of our studios have to be taught by an architect and engineer all the time. That's it. Like, we don't allow an architect to teach by himself, and we don't allow an engineer to teach by himself because we cannot. And hopefully, like, when Kate finishes her schizophrenic program in terms of, you know, Brown and Risley, she will be able just to do that on her own. So that will save us money.
So you mentioned that there aren't many schools that can make the kind of structural shift to this model overnight, but that you have a lot of educators coming through and interested in these ideas. I'm just wondering, what incremental changes have you seen in more conventional schools as first steps towards this kind of thinking?
I think that only schools that we see that are making a difference is really the schools that doing some structural change with their curriculum. Anybody who comes to us to build this fancy building with these fancy tools, you look at them 2-3 years down the line and nothing is changing. But the people who are not building any of this and they are introducing these structural changes into the curriculum are the ones that are really successful. You know, so even the school in Florida, we worked with them over 3 years, sometimes some summer stuff, some other stuff, and we were trying always to go around the core, right? Because nobody can touch the core. And this is kind of the sacred piece about K-12 education. And we could not, nothing really like was sustainable. You know, even I think we ran like the best summer program ever, and it was still did not really turn into anything. But the minute they kind of introduced a unit that is like 80 minutes every 2 days in the schedule, this made all the difference in the world. And suddenly now we are talking about a 3-year plan in which we're going to switch half the schedule into this. You know, so like there has to be a commitment to making that change. And if there is not that commitment, like building the fanciest building on campus is not going to do anything.
I was going to say, sort of building on that question, a lot of what you presented today, there's been research on for decades that support all of your ideas and this type of educational environment, whether it's cognition or motivation, creativity, expertise. What do you see as the biggest obstacle in taking this research and applying it? Because it's been out there for like so long, but it doesn't get translated.
That's the best question ever. And I don't know who's going to answer that. You know, why don't we do it? I mean, all of these things, like the different names that I mentioned in my slide around like 21st century skills, these things are all talking about the same thing. But because we cannot let these things infiltrate the system, we just keep changing their name. You know, but they are really describing the same exact thing, like reform in schools, right? A lot of reform in schools talk about the same thing that we're talking about. And I think a big piece why we cannot do it is that we have a system that is linked together in a very, very strong way. And I feel like the biggest thing that really needs to change is college admissions. That is really the piece that is the strongest. And you know that we standardized our system because colleges wanted that. Because when they admitted students for college, everybody was so different and they could not decide. So in 130 years ago, they were the ones who pushed for the standardization of it. So, you know, we are seeing a lot of changes now where colleges don't require SATs and all of that. But until we get to a point where MIT and Harvard basically are the ones and other schools leading, you know, the back that we're not going to take that as a requirement, you know, then, you know, that needs to happen. And I think, you know, breaking that link hopefully is going to lead to a lot of other linkages being broken.
Because, I mean, the research on standardized tests, I don't know as much about the SAT, but through GRE, it really predicts success your first year in grad school. And then after that, doesn't predict whether you'll graduate, how successful you'll be, or how, you know, whether you'll stick to your research or any of that.
Yeah, I mean, there's all these experiments too about people doing a test, A/B test, and getting an A in it, and doing it in 3 months and failing at it. So what happened? Did you just like get all the information from here and they left from there? And exactly, because we are just, for me, like the whole notion that you focus on the rules and you forget the seeing piece. And if they don't go together, like nothing is gonna stick because it does not mean anything to you.
I'm afraid it's 9:30.
Yeah, I am like fried.
Please join me in thanking Saeed Arida.
Thank you, Penny, so much, and Saeed. Thank you. I'm glad to hear you're fried because you've got a nice, cozy bed for tonight, and then bright and early, we're going to do this again. So in case you missed it, Saeed will join us. The question from the back here about, how do we begin to make these incremental changes? Maybe we may need to make huge systemic changes. But where do we start? That's kind of the beginning of our conversation tomorrow. So if you're interested in helping to fry Saeed's brain a little more tomorrow, at 10 o'clock at the Generator, which is 250 Main Street, just down the hill, we'll have some coffee, we'll have a little bit of sugar, and we'll charge this conversation up. And before we go, I want to introduce somebody who's pretty special to Generator. Karen Cornish, would you stand up? We have a new education coordinator, so tonight's an auspicious night. Welcome, Karen, and once more, thank you all for coming, and thank you so much for tonight's fantastic conversation. Thank you.